Hello and welcome. I'm Saeed from storyplanet.net. Dive right into the essence of the most captivating books without reading them cover to cover. Whether you're on the go, at the gym, or just relaxing at home, we offer you a unique and enriching listening experience. Today, we are exploring the book Dogfight, a creation by Fred Vogelstein. The movie Dogfight, 2013, tells the story of a friendly business partnership that transformed into a heated competition between tech giants Apple and Google as they vied for dominance in the mobile internet device market. Before we delve into these revelations, it's interesting to note that Fred Vogelstein is a journalist who has previously worked as a staff writer for Fortune and the Wall Street Journal. He currently serves as a contributing editor at Wired magazine. Dogfight is his debut publication. With 9 key ideas to unveil, brace yourself for a deep dive into this captivating book on storyplanet.net. To start, the text mentions a technology competition between Apple and Google and suggests finding out what the implications are for the reader. This text discusses the rivalry between Apple and Google in the smartphone market. It highlights the transition from a partnership to a legal battle and mentions the involvement of Steve Jobs and the significance of secrecy and intellectual property. It also alludes to the role of lawyers in the conflict. Key idea number 1. Steve Jobs initially hesitated to create a phone and prioritize the development of the iPod and iTunes. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, which could only play music. The idea of an Apple phone had been on the table, but Steve Jobs didn't want to give control to phone carriers. Instead, Apple focused on the iTunes store. However, competition grew as other manufacturers combined phones and music apps. Apple partnered with Motorola to launch the Roker, but it was unsuccessful. Despite this setback, iPod sales were booming, and Jobs began reconsidering an Apple phone. Key idea number 2. Apple aimed to develop a unique and innovative phone with never-before-seen features. In 2004, Steve Jobs considered developing an Apple phone because mobile connections were fast enough. Apple partnered with Singular, which promised full control of product development. They aimed to create smartphone features never seen before, including a multi-touch screen. The first prototypes were large, but over 2.5 years, the team shrunk the technology to fit in a regular-sized phone. Apple also discovered Gorilla Glass, the hardest glass in the world, which solved the problem of durability. These innovations were groundbreaking at the time. Key idea number 3. Steve Jobs took extensive measures to maintain strict secrecy surrounding the development of the iPhone. During the development of the iPhone, Apple took extreme measures to prevent any information leaks. Steve Jobs cordoned off areas in the office, limited employee access, and imposed strict confidentiality measures. Employees on the iPhone team had to sign non-disclosure agreements and confirm their agreement again through another contract. Sharing information between different iPhone teams was prohibited, and even suppliers were kept in the dark. Jobs went as far as showing fake graphs to suppliers to mislead them about the project. Key idea number 4. Apple executives Tony Fadell and Scott Forstall had a competitive dynamic while vying for control over the iPhone project. Scott Forstall, a software engineer at Apple, proposed a different vision for the iPhone, suggesting that it run a compressed version of the Mac operating system, OS X, instead of the iPod system as initially planned. Despite doubts about its feasibility, Forstall successfully scaled down OS X. This led to a heated rivalry between Forstall and Tony Fadell, the head engineer for the iPod, as they competed for Jobs' favor. Jobs fueled their competitiveness by alternating his support between the two teams. Key idea number 5. Google secretly worked on developing its own smartphone project while collaborating with Apple on the iPhone. In 2007, Apple and Google were not seen as competitors, but rather were on friendly terms. Google assisted in the development of the iPhone by providing software such as YouTube and Google Maps. However, Google had also secretly been working on its own smartphone project called Android. The first Android phone, the sooner, was not successful due to the impressive release of the iPhone. The Android team then started working on the Dream, which aimed to have features that the iPhone did not have. Key idea number 6. iPhone engineers faced pre-launch problems, but the company successfully met its deadline. Jobs unveiled the iPhone at Macworld, despite it not being fully ready for market. He used multiple devices during his flawless presentation to hide its flaws. The phone had issues with memory, virtual keyboard, multi-touch sensors, and antenna manufacturing. However, Apple managed to meet its deadline for launch on June 29th. The media covered the launch extensively, and the iPhone sold well, with 270,000 sold in the first 2 days and 3.4 million in the next 6 months. Key idea number 7. Jobs felt betrayed by Google's Android project and its competitive stance. In 2007, Google announced the development of the Android operating system, which would compete with Apple's iOS. The Open Handset Alliance was formed to develop open, shared standards for mobile devices. Google aimed to promote Android through its open-source operating system. Steve Jobs confronted Google executives about the similarities between Android and the iPhone, but initially believed their reassurances that they were just prototypes. However, he later discovered that Google planned to release a phone with iPhone-like features. Jobs threatened to sue if Google released a multi-touch smartphone, but Google executives complied for a short time before continuing development. Key idea number 8. Apple engaged in a legal battle with Android phone manufacturers over the introduction of multi-touch features on their devices. The HTC Dream, the first Android phone, was a flop, but Google developed better ones. They partnered with Motorola and Verizon to create the Droid, which sold better than the iPhone. Google also released the Nexus One with multi-touch features. Jobs sued HTC for patent infringement, starting a legal battle between Apple and Google. Apple filed lawsuits against Samsung, the top distributor of Android phones. In 2012, Apple won a $1 billion judgment against Samsung. Apple aimed to protect its iPhone features and weaken its biggest competitor in the smartphone market. Key idea number 9. Apple faced legal battles with Google, which had a negative impact on its reputation. However, Apple remained determined and did not let this hinder its competitive spirit. Steve Jobs publicly criticized Google from 2008 until his death in 2011. Google released new products to compete with the iPhone, including Google Voice. When Google offered Google Voice to Apple, Jobs rejected it, which made Apple look bad. Eventually, Apple included Google Voice in the iTunes App Store. Apple responded by attacking Google's dominance in mobile advertising and creating iAd. Apple also launched its own mapping service, Apple Maps, but it was a failure. The battle between Apple and Google is ongoing. In conclusion, the book discusses the evolution of Google and Apple from friendly companies to fierce competitors in the mobile internet industry. Their rivalry eventually led to legal battles. Users have enjoyed improved iPhones and Android-based smartphones as a result. The book also suggests further reading on the life of Steve Jobs, the eccentric founder of Apple. Thank you for listening to this summary. If you enjoyed this exploration, we invite you to discover other fascinating books on storyplanet.net. Don't wait any longer. A multitude of books, stories, and knowledge await you there. See you soon on storyplanet.net.